exploring the investment landscape with a guru's wisdom and a strategist's insight. Good Life Companies presents The Market Update with Noah Brooks and Chris Needs.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we have the Thanksgiving edition of the Market Enthusiast podcast. My name's Noah Brooks. I'm going to be your host today. I'm the Director of Investments at Good Life. And with me, as always, Chris Needs, Senior Research Analyst here at Good Life. Like I said, we have Thanksgiving coming up. What are you doing? You going somewhere?
I'm headed out to my mother's family where they live out in Western PA. So I have a nice 4-hour drive ahead of me.
Yeah. So the TSA has told us that they expect a boatload of people this, they said this 12-day season. I don't really know what that 12-day encompasses, but they're expecting 30 million flyers this weekend. I'm not flying anywhere. You're not flying anywhere. But we're both driving, right? You're driving 4 hours. I'm driving up to Long Island, up to North Fork. That's going to be a 5-hour drive. But they're expecting a lot of traveling for this holiday. And of course, we have Black Friday, right? Did you do any shopping yet?
I haven't been, but I know my wife has. I'm getting those email notifications. So she's been putting in some work already. I guess they're doing some early deals so they don't inundate all the, the FedExes and UPSs of the world.
Yeah. It used to be that, I can remember 15 years ago, Black Friday was such an event that you'd have Thanksgiving, we'd have 20 people over, and after dinner, 8, 9 o'clock, you kind of rest a little bit. And then here locally, some stores would open at 10 or 11, even midnight, and they open the doors and you would go shopping. And I feel like that's kind of pulled back a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Have you ever gone to a Walmart at midnight on Black Friday, right?
I personally have not.
Thanksgiving meals with your family. Let me tell you, it's a madhouse.
I have been to a Target at midnight.
People have their hands on things, on claiming them because the deal's not up until 1 a.m. or something. It's a madhouse. Don't recommend to a friend.
Yeah, but you know why maybe that's not happening right now? Cyber Monday.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So you have those deals, the 75-inch television for $699 or something, but they run it on Amazon. They run it on Walmart.com. They run it on BestBuy.com. So you don't have to go
omni-channel.
I don't even know what that is.
That's, you could order it online, pick it up in the store.
Omni-channel. Right. I thought that might be a website that I was unaware of. I wanted to write it down a little bit. Speaking of traveling, so I'm headed up to Long Island. Now, you're not going to be filling up your car driving, are you?
No, I won't be filling up. I just got a Tesla recently, so I will be going up. I spent a total of $45 charging at home for the entire month of October 20th to November 20th. So,
is that right?
Yeah. I'll take it.
I'm more like $200 a month in gas.
I was near 400, so...
Well, so one of the things that we're looking at, obviously everybody's talking about inflation, right? Gasoline around here is around $3.55 a gallon, which is some of the lowest it's been after COVID.
Yeah.
Now, our local Sheetz here, which is on the East Coast, they're running some special for what is it?
$1.99 per gallon for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, but it's the low end stuff. It's even lower than the normal stuff. It's even lower than regular.
Noah with his BMW getting premium gas. This guy.
Get out of here. That's neither here nor there. But the fact of the matter is that we are experiencing disinflation.
Definitely.
And you see it across the board. I was asking somebody about it, what they thought, and one person happened to bring up eggs. Do you remember last year where egg prices?
The bird flu, yeah. And same with turkeys. It was running through them. So I saw turkey prices are down 32% year over year.
Wow.
Because they were also affected by that. And obviously chickens were as well. So,
yeah. So those may be not sticky prices, right? The other thing that we saw in the CPI report that came out last week was airline prices, ticket prices were down 14% year over year.
Mm-hmm.
That bodes pretty well for travelers, right?
Definitely.
I think after the pandemic, they had they had furloughed or laid off tons of flight attendants and captains and pilots and
even retired planes.
Yeah, retired
Threw them out
planes.
in Arizona in the desert.
Yeah. Well, they're all back online now.
Yep.
And they're still looking for new people. The capacity is expanded. I don't know if you want to say exponentially, but it's expanded a heck of a lot. And, their planes are full. Now, I flew last weekend. We had a client event in Portland. Plane to Vegas was full, probably for Formula One. The plane to Portland was full. The plane back from Portland to Newark was, there wasn't a seat available.
How are those TSA checkpoints?
Honestly, I think they have gotten much better. TSA in Newark, lickety split. TSA in Vegas, I did lose my laptop there though. I was kind of.
That's what I was insinuating.
Oh, okay. I missed that. I thought you were asking a serious question, Chris. Yeah, no, lost my laptop at TSA. That it didn't go so well, but we did get it back. They were very nice. Charged just a little overnight shipping rate, and we got it back. But yeah, so during that trip, though, what I saw in my few days on the West Coast and Las Vegas was that everything was mobbed. I mean, anywhere you go for food or drink,
hour wait.
Well, not an hour wait, but I'm not going to wait an hour, so I wouldn't go to those places. But everywhere you go, it's filled. And there's just people cycling through restaurants and eateries and other retail spots. I mean, the shopping in Vegas was mobbed. The Portland airport was mobbed. The general Portland area, I wasn't downtown, but a little bit south of downtown, was really, really busy. I mean, it doesn't, now this is anecdotal, but it doesn't seem like there's a recession that's happening right now.
Yeah, Saturday night I was down in Philly as well, and it was an hour wait at the restaurant we went to. And then I went into a parking garage after we left my sister-in-law's house, and there wasn't a spot. We started turning around like we were going to come down, and someone pulled out of a spot, and we were like, thank goodness. Like, we didn't just come into this parking garage just to pay a fee, and we got a spot, thankfully. So things are booming out there. People are still spending, despite, what you may hear.
Yeah, they are. And the market is kind of responding to the disinflation. And I'll just pause there for a second. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm suggesting that prices are coming down. Now, there are some real volatile prices like gasoline, like the airline tickets, things like that, that have come down a little bit. But, food and shelter, what they call core, they're not coming down. I mean, that doesn't seem to be the case. So when I say disinflation, I'm not talking about deflation.
Right.
Over the last 70 or 80 years, deflation has really only happened a few times. We had deflation during 73, 74, market meltdown, if you will. And then during the global financial crisis, we had obviously housing deflation.
Well, yeah, that's something we talk about. Obviously, people are so disenchanted with inflation, and they expect prices to go back to 2020 or 2021. And to your point, it would be a bad thing if that happened. Yeah. There would be a meltdown in the market. Earnings would collapse. It wouldn't be, you'd feel the pain, even though you would get your cheaper prices if that were the case.
Yeah. So prices aren't going to go down. But the number, the reported number that CPI came out with last Tuesday, I think it was, 3.2%, which is much lower than the 9% that we saw in June of 2022. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I think it's important to note. So when Jay Powell said that inflation was transitory, right? He got a lot of flack for that. And I mean, so I didn't look up the definition of the word transitory, but I think of like a transient. He's always moving. They're always moving. And transitory, it's here, but it's not going to stay here. And here we are, 18 months later, 19 months later, and it's back down below 3.2. PPI, Producer Price Index, which measures the cost of input prices for manufacturing, came out at 2.1.
Well, since we've saw this trend change here at the end of October, very, very end of October, we've started getting some really good economic data that, like you said, like PPI, You look at the unit labor costs, you look at some of the other pieces, the CPI that people have been looking at, and everything is going in the right direction. Whereas up until that point, the September numbers that we received in October weren't necessarily indicating that. Everything was still looking pretty hot. But we're starting to see some numbers the Fed can work with. And that's led to a shift in the CME FedWatch expectations of rates. We're at a 30% expectation of a cut in March, which I think is far too soon. I don't know about you, but they're also up to 100 basis points in cuts at 57%, at least 100 basis points.
I don't think it's going
by December.
I don't by December 24.
Yes,
I don't 100.
I don't see it.
Much.
Jay has told us that's not happening. He's told us higher for longer.
I'm going to go back to the good data that you mentioned just a moment ago. Federal Reserve, almost every single time when asked by reporters what it's going to take to pause or to stop, they have said we are, what's the word, data dependent. And we are now in getting the data, and I think they are checking the boxes. CPI, PPI, jobs slowing down, unemployment coming up more than 0.5%, right?
Productivity up, though, in the midst of all that, as well as with the unit labor costs going down. It was, I think, what was about 1% or 1.7% below expectation, 0.95 expected, negative 0.8 we got, and then 4.7% productivity versus 4.1 quarter over quarter. Those are really good numbers. You're getting the best of both worlds from the Fed.
Yeah. So that they have said, really, I mean, they don't want to cause a recession, but they're not opposed to it. They've told us they're data dependent. And I think they are right now, they're like, these are the numbers that we needed to say that we're done. Now, they don't want to say that they're done. And they actually came out and made a point to say, hey, we will continue to raise if needed.
They don't want that burn scenario where it comes roaring back if they just say they're done.
Right.
And then the market's off to the races again.
Right.
And
But when you think about it, when you think about the time frame of what happened, so you have these COVID lockdowns. You have everybody, I keep saying this, everybody was self-actualizing. They're quitting their jobs. They don't want to wash dishes for $12 an hour. I don't want to wash dishes for $12 an hour. Businesses have to raise their starting salary to keep people and to attract new people, right?
mm-hmm.
So that causes wage inflation. Then you have the supply chain issue where it's taking, months and months and months to get stuff imported in, not to mention the cost of those containers went up 10, in some cases 15-fold. Those things are essentially gone.
Remember when we used to look at the ships floating outside of China? Those maps were madness.
They're crazy, right? At one point, I think there were over 1,000 container ships floating on the east coast of China and Shanghai, and nobody's talking about that anymore. It's not a thing. In California, they had a count of how many were off of Long Beach, right? The port of Long Beach.
Probably single digits at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just who's there unloading that day, right? So those items, I mean, I think, I don't know, I think we came to like a factor, what percentage was supply chain, what percentage was stimulus, what percentage was wage inflation. But all of those things are really dissipating at the moment. There's no supply chain. Wage inflation has come down relatively dramatically. It's not back to pre-COVID levels, but it is significantly lower. All of those items contribute to inflation, and they really are settled back down. So I think history books may look at Jay Powell's wording of his transitory statement, and I think they could agree with that at some point.
It doesn't look so egregious now, certainly, but I think he would admit that it was stickier than even he thought it would be. I think he would admit that.
Did you see him the other day? He cursed at the protester holding the door.
No.
Jay Powell, I kind of like that guy. I don't know. Some people don't like him, but
he's a deadhead. He's a fun guy.
He seems all right to me. So what else are we seeing? One of the things,
that strong trend change. I mean, the market really has jumped here in November. So, I mean, that's the first thing. November
to date, we're up about 8.5%, right? A year to date on the S&P 500, up, I think it's 18.5%. So November, I mean, came roaring back. Small caps climbed 5% themselves last week when the market was only up, I think, 2%.
And they were up 7% that week of October 30th through November 3rd.
Yeah.
A huge week, huge bounce off of oversold conditions. That was much welcomed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there are still some people that are questioning, and these may be perma bears, but they're questioning, is it a dead cat bounce? Is it a short covering in a bear market?
We do talk about those short covering rallies a lot. I
Right.
mean, the most vicious days up happen to be in bear markets, we find. So, I mean, it's yet to be seen, but the economic data is certainly putting some credence and support behind those moves.
Yeah.
It seems
like a dull week this week. This is Thanksgiving week. Kind of a dull week. What's the old adage? Never short a dull market. Right. So maybe we get something really going here. I just want to go back to transitory and inflation for a little bit. I'm not a big prognosticator, but I think that there's a good chance that the Fed could be done. They probably, being data dependent, they probably think themselves that they're done. If I could put words in their mouth, which I'm going to do. But they reserve the right, if inflation starts ratcheting back up again, they're going to reserve the right to do it again. But we have this lag. I mean, the old line from Milton Friedman, monetary policy affects economic activity with long and variable lags. So they started raising and
that number is attributed around 18 months is what we hear, I think, most common.
Yeah. I mean, so 18 months ago, what does that bring us to, Chris?
Pretty darn near zero. I mean, we moved up that fast.
It was quick. So there could be a scenario where they have to lower, I guess. I don't think that's going to play out. But long and variable lags, I mean, we're just seeing the effects in the economy. Financial conditions are tightening. There's no question about it. One of the things that I'm starting to see now, you might have seen it, Ford is now offering some 0% financing on a few of their vehicles and 2.6 on some of them. Not on the F-150, guys. I know everybody wants to go buy an F-150. Not on that. But on some of their, maybe lesser selling vehicles, they're offering that. I mean, that's the first time that we've seen that since pre-COVID.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, different credit conditions that we haven't seen in a while, with these rates higher, one thing I noticed when I was going to buy that car was my bank, Wells Fargo, doesn't offer direct loans anymore. They only do indirect, which I thought was kind of strange. And they've pulled out of mortgage lending markets as well for direct mortgage loans. Two things that I think certainly show a tightening in credit. And to your point, I think the Fed is leaning towards being done. I think they see what's on the horizon. And I think low tenths of a percent GDP, or maybe one or two scattered around negative. I think that's the base case. A lot of the managers we listen to, on a weekly basis, and the fund managers we talk to all the time, everyone seems to have at least a mild recession or a growth recession pegged. And I think the Fed sees that and hears that too. So I definitely think I'm leaning towards that impetus, that opinion as well, that they're done.
Yeah. Well, I have
they just don't want to be backed in a corner and say they're done, obviously.
Yeah, no question about it. One thing that we didn't talk about was mortgages, right? So the average 30-year mortgage this week is in, close to 7.5. I think it's 7.44 at the close of business on Friday. And you and I have this talk a lot. We talk to a lot of people. The fact that, my parents' first mortgage in 1981 was 14% or something like that. You can't compare those two. Their first mortgage was for, I don't know, $28,000 or something. The mortgages now are not. You can't buy a $30,000 house.
Yeah, the price of a home compared to the inflation of wages. You compare the inflation of those two things, and they're not equal.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously after COVID, house prices went nutty. I think the median price of a house, the data came out yesterday, I think was around $380,000, the median price. And if you are, if you're a new first time home buyer, coming out of school, even, working a reasonably good job, I mean, to go buy a close to $400,000 house at 7.5, that is going to take a lot of your income if you can even
That's
do
a tall
it.
task,
Yeah.
for sure.
And with financial conditions tightening, meaning banks maybe closing in on their lending a little bit, it is going to be more and more difficult. And so when we talk about a recession, what do we need? We need 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. Now, we had that back in 2022.
But we're seeing 200,000 plus jobs per month
Right.
gained.
Right.
So-
Absolutely. But it is possible. Now, I think if I do my math right, that residential housing, represents about 4.5 to 5% of GDP growth, and pretty straightforward, or GDP, not GDP growth, but of GDP in general. And so if there is a housing recession, because there's not enough inventory and there's not enough being built because we've been underbuilding after the global financial crisis, and C, of course, 7.5% mortgages. So if there is a housing recession, that is going to show up in GDP data. No question about it. And so maybe the soft landing, like everybody asks, well, how do you get to the soft landing? Well, maybe that soft landing is, hey, you have a point off of GDP because of housing that's not selling. You have a point off of GDP for tertiary stuff around housing, and GDP comes down, but we don't go into a crisis mode like 2008 or after the dot-com bubble in 2000, 2001. And maybe that's how we get a soft landing.
It's very possible. I mean, what's your definition of a soft landing? That's just another thing, the Greenspan vague term of, the talking heads say it on TV all the time, but what does it actually mean? Can we assign numbers to that term?
I'm going to throw that back at you. What's your definition of a soft landing?
In our current scenario, I would say we're looking at below 5% unemployment. So maybe 4.5, 4.6% unemployment, and 2 very minor negative quarters on GDP. So maybe negative 0.2, negative 0.3, or negative 0.1, negative 0.3, something like that. The Q3 numbers that just came out from this year, 4.9%. That's a huge number. That's going to be a tough hurdle to eclipse next year. And to your point, sort of the slowdown in housing that we're seeing in the Zillow prices that has the long lag in the CPI numbers, maybe that's going to come into effect, like you said, and really keep us below that number next year.
Yeah. I would tend to agree with you on the unemployment, right? So if we need 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, and you need unemployment to rise, I think it's definitely possible that we could get that. But we have this recency bias that the last recession that we went through was terrible. You were thinking in mid 2009, early 2009, you were thinking you were going to go to a bank, to an ATM, and it may not give you any money. I mean, that's not going to happen, right? That's not in the cards at the moment. I'm not saying it could never happen or anything like that, but that's not in the cards. So my idea of the soft landing is that there's a mild increase in unemployment, and that there is a mild decrease in GDP, like you just kind of mentioned. And I think it's possible that we get there because of housing. Not the same way 2008 was, but because of housing slowdown.
Yeah, totally. And I hear you 100%. Some people who I listen to, or, the talking fin twits online, they think a soft landing is no recession at all. Like, they think a soft landing is equivalent to a no landing. So I wonder what their no landing is like.
The no landing is the market, goes up and we don't have any job loss, right? I mean, that's what a no landing is.
Yeah.
Just one note on housing. I think and this kind of goes along with my positioning here, but mortgage affordability, the worst it's been. And one thing that we're seeing that is actually trying to help mortgage affordability is you're seeing builders building smaller houses. So the numbers that I've seen going back, 15 years or so, the average square footage of a house in the United States was something like 2,600 square feet back 15 years ago. And the newest number that came out says it's less than 2,100. So locally here, we have builders doing 3-bed, 2.5 bath that are under 2,000 square feet. And they're starting.
So no Thanksgiving dinner in this new
well,
house.
they've gotten rid of the dining rooms.
Yep.
I mean, who uses a formal dining room anymore? Is kitchen bar?
Matriarch and patriarch
Yeah.
go to their house.
Yeah.
Don't come to my house.
Well, that's what you're doing this weekend, right?
Yep.
Where are you going?
We're going to my grandmother has passed away, and grandfather, but we're going to their house and having a sort of a last hurrah of
At their
Thanksgiving
house,
at their house.
without them?
Without them. Yep.
Okay. Well,
My aunt has moved into the house,
I
so
gotcha.
we're going to visit all them,
Gotcha,
obviously.
gotcha. Okay. Well, listen. On that note, why don't we wrap up? So here's where we are. We have disinflation that's happening, right? We talked about prices coming down or prices settling down, a few of them. And then we talked about some of the other prices that are slowing down their increase. We have CPI coming in at 3.2. We have PPI coming in at 2.1. I think the Federal Reserve is checking those boxes. I think I'd like to. I'm not gonna guarantee it, right? We don't do that around here, but I'm gonna say that the Federal Reserve is probably done raising rates, and that may, that's like finally, because that's what everybody's been looking for. Now they don't want to announce that, as you mentioned, because if everybody knows they're done, then you just have this buying beforehand in anticipation of that. But I think they're done. And I think we could just, we're, like I said, we're up 18.5%. But if we just grind here for a little bit, maybe we end up 15, maybe we end up 21. That would still be a decent year, right?
Yeah, post midterm years are historically very strong. And surprisingly, a year that good in the S&P 500 would actually be a down year for, if you're looking at the presidential cycle after a midterm. Averages, I think it's around 33%. Something wild like that.
Bunch of stuff we didn't talk about, right? So we'll get to that on the next one. We didn't talk about anything geopolitical, right? We know Russia and Israel. That's.
But Xi came to America. Everything's okay.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. And then they call them a dictator. I don't know. We'll talk about that next time.
You see Anthony Blinken's face when he said that? Oh my.
So hey. It's Thanksgiving week. Thank you so much for joining us, for listening to us. We really appreciate it. I'm Noah Brooks, Director of Investments at Good Life. And with me, as always, is Chris Needs. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.